and welcome to our relationship with writing. I am Katie Carlizzle. Just kidding, it's Carlisle.
And I'm Anthony. It's also Carlisle. It's not.
It's
So,
Lufusi.
okay. And we're two writers who, by the way, we haven't really brought this up because it is called Our Relationship with Writing. We are engaged to be married, guys. A
We
couple,
are.
a couple of people have commented about that below.
It's on
Now,
the
wait.
horizon.
It's what brings us together. It's not what brings us together today. Today, we're here to talk about some writing topics. So, first of all, thank you all for joining us in our show. I know it's a new channel. If you're joining for the first time, please hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button if you're so kind. Maybe comment something below if you have questions, comments, or concerns, or just want to be cool and help us with the algorithm. Otherwise, we're here to talk about specific writing topics. And what are those today?
Today we're going to talk about some writing rules, and this
Sweet.
was actually based on your post that you recently put up on your
Yeah.
socials, and I liked it. I like this question
Mhm.
because I think this is a question that we can all kind of relate to as writers, and as creatives in general. I think every creative medium has its own set of rules that people acknowledge and then say, well, to hell with this. I'm going to do what I want anyway. And generally, it works out better in the long run for doing that.
But
But
there are reasons behind these,
are.
certain rules. So we're
So
going to go into some of that.
we are. We're going to unpack some of those. We're just going to do two today.
Yeah.
And if you like what we talked about today, go ahead and give us a comment down below and tell us about some other rules that you've come across that you kind of shake your head at and wonder why?
Yes,
Why? Um, that's how I do it anyway. Um,
she does.
yeah, he can attest. I'm sitting over there and I'm saying, why? Without further ado, here are my book of writing rules. The first one that I actually responded to you with
Yeah.
was the show don't tell rule.
Yes.
And I hear people say this all of the dang time.
So people hate show don't tell.
Oh
People
yeah.
people hate to be told that. People know it's a thing. So if you're out there right now and you're like, "What do you mean by show don't tell? What exactly? What do people mean by that?"
Okay, so
Older.
the general interpretation
Okay.
of show don't tell, I think we should start there,
Yeah.
is, take a painstaking amount of time to describe every single little detail,
Right.
every little bit of minutia that is involved in your manuscript, and don't tell anything, so don't narrate really. It's
Right. Right.
just
So like,
yeah.
okay, so the difference would be like if you were like the I walk through wet grass, versus like the do escape the each blade of grass like a soul leaving a body or something like that. Like you
Drenched my
drench.
bare feet.
Yeah. There are various ways to do it, and some people imagine, and I totally understand why because it's said ad nauseum, ad nauseum by so many people, but. Some people imagine that they mean you have to describe literally everything in a Tolkien-esque way
Yeah.
in which like you'll never escape your front door because you're constantly describing everything on the walls and
Yeah.
going with each step. So, and I get that. I
Yes.
understand like why people shake their fist at that. But what do you imagine like the actual intention of that rule is?
So I think the intention of this rule, it actually brings me back to when I was writing my first book.
Reasonable?
Yes, reasonable. I When I was writing this, I had a tendency to tell
Mhm.
and not show
Yeah.
things that really should have been shown.
Okay.
So, one of my betas slash editors, amazing woman named Lauren, who I love and adore, she is very blunt and brutal in her feedback always, and
That's
that's
always the
why
best.
I love that because it makes me a better writer. I'm not here to have people kiss my ass and tell me what I did right. I want to know what I'm doing, what I can improve on.
My favorite thing about when we read your books together and you always look at me and you're like, "What did you hate?" And
What
I'm
did you
like,
hate?
"Let me tell you."
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's
And
fun
I
to do
sit
that.
there and I grind my teeth. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I sit there and I take notes and then I go back the
It's like
next day and I
reasons I will
address
kill
them.
him later. Reasons I will
False.
kill.
False. Anyway, so Lauren
That
told
book's
me.
already full. And I was
So, it's this one.
yeah.
So Lauren told me you're kind of just glossing over and skipping all of the important parts and the little juicy details that I want to see. I don't know what any of these rooms look like. I don't know what any of your characters look like.
That's fair.
So I need those details so I can get more lost in the story. So I think when we say, show, don't tell, it's really just a way of taking those moments to communicate emotionality,
Yes.
to ground the reader in the setting and who the characters are, take those moments to describe, who they are as people, what they're experiencing or in the world
Mhm.
around them. Especially for fantasy writers, I think that that's fair, and that's where you kind of run into the
Right.
Tolkien-esque, painstaking descriptions. For a fantasy writer, I would say take the opportunity to
Well,
tell sometimes and
yeah.
don't
No,
show.
absolutely. I kind of like think of it as like we're leading the stream of consciousness of the reader, you know?
Yeah,
So like the showing is the depth to which we dig a trench, you know? And the telling is like showing which or telling them which way it's going to be going. You know?
yeah,
So like they pour water into this thing and like if we don't dig it deep enough, it's going to go everywhere. They're like, "Okay, well, what color is the sky? What color is this? What's going on?"
right.
And their water flows all over the place. It's a
Yeah,
flat ground and it's just spread too thin. It's not a story anymore. But
yeah,
we have to dig it just deep enough so they can follow this path and like,
yes.
make a canal of our story, you know?
Exactly. And then, additionally, I would say that showing instead of telling is a great way to make sure that your story is being paced appropriately.
Yeah,
Because
that's
if
fair.
you have a story that is being told too too much
Hmm.
and you're not taking those opportunities to expand upon, what your characters are thinking, feeling, what they're looking at, those kinds of things, um, then all of a sudden you're looking down and you don't have a novel, you have a novella or a short
That's
story.
fair. I wonder if a lot of people who hear show don't tell are often underwriters.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think,
people who I wonder
yeah,
about that, and I do wonder, like if you're out there and you've been told by editors or people, and you're like, it really grinds my gears when people say this about my work. Like I'm curious, like I want to know, like if you tend to come up like short with your word count, or if you're like, no, I'm literally like, I'm at the very tip of top. I'm like 80,000 words, and I couldn't possibly show anymore. Like I want to know, like where do people, tend
yeah.
to
I
lay in
think
there?
that's
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm also curious about what about like planners, like pantsers versus planners, as
oh
far
yeah,
as
that's a
show
good
versus
point.
for show versus tell or yeah, show versus telling. Because
Yeah.
you're a multi like a crazy planner, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
You pants one,
I
right?
pantsed my first novel, and that's honestly why that novel spans over three books.
That's
Like that, the
interesting. That's
whole
what
the
yeah.
whole reason I have a trilogy instead of a standalone novel, like it should have been,
Mhm.
honestly, like I own that all day long. That book is too long. It could have been way shorter. It's great. I love the
Yeah.
series. I'm proud of that work, but it could have been a standalone novel done in one thing if I had taken the time to plot it out instead of pants it. But I
So
pantsed it. I had to plot out the other two to make sure that I remained within that
That's
structure.
that's funny because it sounds, or at least I could infer that it's like you were doing a lot more showing than you necessarily had to with that story as a whole.
Oh yeah.
And that was a result of not planning ahead
It
of
was
time,
the
which is
result
interesting.
of not planning and also receiving that feedback from Lauren very early on where I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I should just take the opportunity to describe everything. Every single thing.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with it. It
Yeah.
did teach me a lot about that show don't tell rule and when I was able to sacrifice it
Yeah.
sometimes and as I branched out and started completing other works, I realized, I always have Lauren's feedback in my head. That really stuck with me. So I do still take that opportunity to show the things that my characters are going through or you know, just instead of telling the reader what they should
Of course.
feel or think or whatever, show it in a certain way. But I think I also was taught a very valuable lesson in knowing when to take someone's feedback and be like, okay, I'm going to take your voice out of my head, put it to the side because this is what's right for the
Oh,
story.
that's very fair. And I'm sure everyone, and that's part of what we're doing here when we talk about rules and like breaking rules
Yeah.
when they're appropriate and how they can be, used to our advantage, in
Yeah.
various ways. But like because we all know what's best for our particular story, our
Right.
respective
And
stories.
I think as writers too, because a lot of us, especially those of us who have completed a novel and published it and everything, many of us have gone to school for writing, so we have those professors' voices in our head, telling us all these things and why we're wrong, and so that we like latch onto that and think this is the word of God. We need to
Yeah.
listen to this forever.
It is very interesting how that worked. Yeah, yeah, and we'll get into a lot of those things in
Yeah.
future videos, but because we talk about these things a lot,
Oh
especially
God.
dialogue tags and
Yeah.
all
Oh
these things.
yeah.
Like we've been talking about this recently. So anyway, but as far as like show don't tell, was there anything else that you wanted to get
I think that's
into?
that's more or less it, is to really just strike that balance. The show don't tell rule, while it can be very infuriating to receive as a writer and get that feedback, and you kind of like he said, shake your fist at it and wonder, what the heck, how am I not showing enough? It's also a valuable tool to use and have in your arsenal as a writer.
Of course.
So take those opportunities to give those juicy details and know when they're better sacrificed than left to the side.
Oh yeah, and not to mention sometimes what's mistaken as um excruciating detail and like showing things sometimes it's showing the interiority rather than telling what the emotion is.
Yes.
And I think that that's the real important thing and a big part of the intention that people overlook when they make
Right.
the assumption that they want you to
Yeah.
describe the tree like Tolkien. What they really want you to do is show what the character is doing rather than simply saying the character is angry.
Right.
Is
Like,
the
yeah,
character breaking a branch? Is the character shaking
exactly.
their fist? Is the character, show what they're doing. Don't just say they're mad.
Yeah.
That's the when you recognize those moments where you can elevate a moment through description, that's when you want to show it. And that's on you. And
Yeah.
it's not every moment, it's not every tree branch,
Yes.
but sometimes it is appropriate to show and
Right.
not tell.
I think honestly, emotionality is where that rule kind of applies the most, because if you can't give those visceral moments of a character's emotions and show them,
Right.
how they're really feeling, then your reader's not going to get that either. And I,
Right.
I think that that's really important, especially when come to things like, relatable versus likable characters and things like that. And,
And talk about that too. Yeah.
yeah, we'll talk about that next time. The other rule that I wanted to touch on during this video as well was the write what you know rule.
Yes.
Okay, quick anecdote. I hate this. I hate this rule, and I hate it because it makes people think that, in order for you to be a good writer, that you have to have had all of these like painful
Yeah.
lived experiences. And as somebody who has had a lot of painful lived experiences, one of my editors in chief at the literary magazine that I worked on in college came to me one day and was like, I'm very jealous of you because you've had such a horrible life, and I wish that I did so I could be a better writer. And I was just like,
Just don't do that.
okay.
Yeah. Don't do that.
Like, first of all, that is one of the most misguided interpretations of the write what you know rule that I have ever had to suffer through in my life.
Yeah.
But secondly, I think a lot of people kind of have that, maybe not to that degree,
Right.
but we've come as writers to mistakenly understand this as, well, you can't write from certain perspectives or points of view because you don't have those experiences, and how could you ever communicate that in an effective way? Well, I'm not a serial killer, but I wrote an entire novel from a serial killer's perspective and talked at length about, all of the emotions that he was going through. I drew upon my experiences of having gone through child abuse, of having had very toxic relationships and things like that. So, you can write about things that you have never experienced before from perspectives that you don't share.
Yes.
in a very effective way.
Yeah.
But the writing, what you know, comes from drawing upon those personal experiences, your relationships that you've had, emotions that you've felt, jobs that you've had, things like that,
Okay.
where you don't have to necessarily. Well, I like what you said yesterday about the dragon.
Which thing?
Where you were like, nobody knows what a
Oh, yeah.
dragon is or
Yeah.
what it looks like, but
Yeah.
yeah, we got all these fantasy books about dragons, so where does
It's
the
like,
write what you know rule apply there?
right. Well, when it's being interpreted this way,
Exactly.
so it's like it doesn't work that way. And I said yesterday, I like to think of it almost like an empathy versus sympathy thing.
Hmm.
Like people are acting as if like you have to be able to 100% empathize in that you've had those lived experiences,
Yeah.
but that's not the case. The case is just simply if you've ever experienced any level of loss, you understand how to inform a specific work with loss. And of
Yeah.
course, the level to which you've experienced loss, unfortunately, will inform your work to deeper levels, which is what the rule really is trying to do, which is to
Yeah.
help you elevate your work in an emotional way or in a way that feels authentic to your experiences as a human, because that will translate in a relatable way for the readers. In
Yeah.
a way that like you've experienced loss that we've both experienced loss, but
Yeah,
you've experienced a
absolutely.
loss much closer to you than I have, just in various
That's
ways.
fair.
And that being said, you'd never judge me for writing like a lot, like someone
No.
losing a loved one or whatever, you know what I mean? However, there are certain things that you have in your experiences and that you can pull from your own
Yeah.
experiences with your personal loss that I can only imagine,
Yeah.
right? And I think the rules trying to get people to pull from their experiences, whatever they may be, not like, oh my God, if you've never flown a plane before, you can't fly a plane. But if you've ever felt the fear of driving a car for the first time, maybe you'll know what it's like to drive a plane for the first, fly a plane for the first time.
Yeah.
You have to try to like sympathize with the character in a way through your experiences and
Yeah.
what you know. What you know is the fear and the doubt and the love and the
Yeah.
catharsis, and you understand these things as a human in various ways.
I was just gonna say, like, there are certain, emotions that, regardless of what your experience has been in your life, we have all had to some degree.
Yeah.
So, you might not have been abused as a child, but you can write about child abuse because we've all felt scared and alone at one point
Yes.
or another in our life.
And yeah, and I think that the write what you know thing is basically an elevated stay in your lane situation, because
Yeah.
of course, yes, you can if you've ever felt any sort of rejection or pain or like or any sort of ridicule at all, you can write abuse. However, if you try to write something like, the like absolute abuse and say that this is reflective of general abuse
Yeah.
and you're making broad claims about
Yeah.
things, you're going to get some pushback. People are going to
Right.
say that wasn't my experience, and that's always going to be the case. However, the idea is just that like your personal experience, the depth of your experience with whichever emotion or whatever will inform the work to that degree.
Yeah.
So if you've lived a privileged life and you've only ever, and I mean that in the most like freaking Siddhartha, like I'm living in a golden castle in the clouds, I don't even know death exists.
Yeah.
You can't really write about death until you see it and you experience it, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
sure, okay, now I can write this book. I'm
Right.
Buddha now, or
Right.
what, like it's crazy. But I think it gets, just like all the other rules, it gets just pushed way out of bounds, and like it gets taken way too literally,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I would kind of push back on that Siddhartha comparison because if you are living in that golden castle and you really
Mhm.
want to be a writer and you really want to
Mhm.
write about death and you've never experienced it, then I think there are ways that you can access those similar emotions within the realm of experience that you've already had. So like, you've had your favorite Prada bag just demolished or stolen, God forbid, to some degree, then like, obviously you have those emotions of loss,
Yeah.
of, kind of anger, denial that it happened. You're
Yeah.
going through those stages of grief over your very expensive purse. So I think that there are ways that you can draw upon those experiences, even if they are a little bit superficial, to talk about things that are deeper.
Yes. But that being said, the depth to which you'll talk about those things rather than talking about your discovery of those things is
Right.
a world's difference. You
Yeah.
know, it's so much more interesting, at least for a reader, for me as a reader, I'll say, to read someone's experience like Siddhartha, who was like literally didn't know people aged and was just like, whoa, wait, this happens?
What?
I've only ever been around beautiful, like perfect people. What is happening? And he literally has to have this like whole hero's journey of literally becoming a mortal human
Yeah.
to attain some level of like otherworldly consciousness, but he discovers that through like or like we get to read of his like discovery of like leaving Plato's cave, like it's fun. Like if someone's in the cave and the whole story is just them talking about how beautiful the outside world is, they're just guessing and we're like, okay, it's not as great. And it's more fun to follow them through taking their chains off. And,
Yeah.
and that's the experience that they have is the ignorance that, and because like most of a hero's journey is dispelling an ignorance, you're dispelling one ignorance or another in order to attain something,
Yeah.
even if that's the knowledge that you had ignorance,
Yeah.
but anyway, but I agree with you, but anyone can write anything. And that's the point. I think that like people take this rule way out of context and they don't
Yeah.
understand the intention of it. And it's frustrating because none of those rules matter,
No, they really don't. And like at the end of the day, we're sitting here talking about these rules and giving some guidance on, when they're generally applied and how to use them to your advantage. But at the end of the day, like, fuck them.
Well, yeah, well, at the like, well, I like to think of all of this stuff as tools tools that are used as weapons is the problem.
Well, yeah, and
That's
this kind of goes back to the last thing that we talked about on here, which was social media marketing,
uh,
where, we all have access to all of these different platforms, but just because they exist doesn't mean you have to use them all.
that's true.
And you don't have, like, some of them are going to work better in your advantage than others. And it's all about understanding, what you as a writer and as a person
Yeah.
determine to be the best set of tools for you to reach your end goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the like that's perfectly said. Some of these things I love you. Some but some of these things are tools to elevate your work. Some of them are restrictions to help you find creativity within limitation, which has always been a thing within art. And I know people like to shirk it. I'm one of those people. But when you just look back at like anything like poetry, for instance, right?
Mhm.
Like how like iambic pentameter has like a specific rhythm. So does a haiku has 575. We all know this. Those are limitations that we give to ourselves in order to facilitate a creativity that we could find elsewhere but want to play within these
Yeah.
restrictions.
I think that's very well said too, and especially for beginners, is like, I think it's important to lean on those limitations at first and use them to guide you and hone your craft before you start saying, well, fuck these rules, I don't need them.
Yeah,
Because you need that structure first and that understanding of what the true intention behind these rules
I'm glad you
is.
got there because yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly. I think that's why we want to talk about this because we
Yeah.
both see people struggling through this and saying like, "Ugh, fuck, show don't tell, fuck," and it's like, yeah, but like at that point, just like leave it alone, like forget it,
Yeah.
because like all you're doing is trying to kind of obfuscate what the actual intention is, or you're living under, this presumption that it's ill-intended when it's not. Like that,
Right.
no one's trying to stifle anyone's creativity or anything like that. I never feel like anyone like
No.
but if someone is doing that, screw them.
Right.
They're not important. They're not your intended audience, and they don't matter, right?
Yes, so and so.
Yeah. So yeah. So when you're faced with these various rules, try to just look at the intention of the rule and what you can actually get from it. Don't let people use it against you as a weapon, but try to have it in your arsenal as a writer, so it's a tool that you can use to make your work better.
Hallelujah, amen.
So, what do you want to talk about next time?
Next time. That's a good question. Why don't
Let
we
us
let
know.
you guys
Yeah,
decide?
let us know below if you have any topics about writing or any questions for us. Let us know below, and we'll see what everyone wants to hear from us. Whoa, 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 whoa,
We'll
whoa,
see.
whoa,
We'll
whoa.
see what you guys want to talk about.
I'm a little bit
He's a
Morty
little bit
sometimes. It
Morty.
just
He's a
happens.
lot bit Morty.
Listen, I'm a nerd.
Thank you guys so much for joining us in this discussion on the rules of writing. If you like what you heard, you want to hear more, you want suggestions for what we should talk about next time, drop us a comment. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Share us on all the social medias. Just get it out there. Get it out there. Come back. Come back. Spread it around. Get some more people going. All right. I'm sorry. I'm done. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm KT Carlisle.
I'm Anthony Lafusi.
We will see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.
My Sasquatch is all squishy.
Yeah, it is.
He's a squish squatch.
A squish squash.
A squish squatch.
A sasquish.
Sasquish. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a better one. I retire. Passing the torch to you.
Oh, thank you. I'll take this here. Sasquatch.
Sasquish.
Sasquish. Squish squash.
I vote that's the way that you end. We have issues. We are issues, I said.
That's not what we're recording. Why would I end? We have issues with that. It's just like this.
Crossover
episode. Squish squash.
Squish squash.
Squish squash. Anyway.
Anywho.
So you lead this one. I'm just here to look good.
Ain't that the truth?
I don't do anything this show. What you show up, I show up, you do the work, I just go.
Yeah.
I reinforce what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get to be the Garth.
Pizza, gardening.
That's who I am.
That's who I am. Oh my God. Okay, here we go.
Gardening. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And so do they. And that's why I'm here. Pizza garden.
Metaphors.